Well, howdy there, daylight burners. Happy Monday. Hope you had a good weekend. Uh, it was a weird one. Um, Still trying to get over this whole coronavirus deal, but 20th anniversary of September 11th attacks, and boy, we had some. It was just weird, kind of weird looking back on it. Uh, One thing I know for sure is I'm getting old. Feel like I'm getting real old. I was telling my wife it's been 20 years since I was in New York City. I've been several times growing up, and September 11th was well. I think just about everybody. I know there's probably a few of you folks that listen to the show that either weren't born yet or were way too young to even remember what the hell went on. I think I know. No partner Jordan just turned 21 here the other day. So yeah, you're just a baby, and I mean I wasn't much older. I guess I was 15 when it all went down, and boy, it just seems like a long time ago. Sure seems like a whole different America, to say the least. But it's one of those defining moments in America. I know if you were old enough to know what was going on or to be able to comprehend the news and whatnot. You dang sure remember where you were, and I was on the school bus headed to school, obviously, and we got on and I think as the crow flies, it was 3 miles to Teed Hancock's house. He was he was my best friend at the time, still one of my best friends to this day. I don't talk to him near as much as I used to, but uh, boy, we were pretty inseparable back then. And but you know, bus bus route didn't go as the crow flies, so long way around. I think it was about 6 miles to get over to his place, and he was the next stop on the bus. And so I was 15, just started my sophomore year of high school, and we went and picked up Teed. He was a freshman, and he gets on and he said there was some planes that flew into those buildings there in New York, and he was describing it how plane had just flown into a building and it was a big bomb and whatnot, or not. He said it looked like a great big bomb, and I honestly I thought he was watching a movie or something, some new action movie that I hadn't heard of, and mostly I believe that because I literally a month to the day had just been in the World Trade Center. Um, so I guess to rewind, I know a few of you I've mentioned this before, but we've had some new listeners ever since I told it last. But I'm adopted, and I've got a younger brother who's from Vietnam who's also adopted, a younger brother from Haiti who's also adopted, and I got a big family. And I grew up. This was there in south of Walsh, Colorado, uh, way out in the middle of the Eastern Plains, about as far southeast as you can get in the state of Colorado and still be in the state. And somehow, some way, these folks from New York City, well, I guess Rye, New York, is where they lived, which it was a suburb of the city itself, and they were an older, very wealthy Jewish family. They were I secular Jews, I guess was what you would consider them. They weren't the Orthodox, the Hasidic Jews with like the curly curly hairs in the top hat, and they they uh, they were more, I guess, cultural Jewish. I don't know. Anyway, they weren't strictly religious types. Um, but their son, who was he's still alive, I guess. So he would be, oh, maybe 6 8 years older than me, maybe 10 years, a little bit older than me, and he had just graduated. Uh, I guess he had done his undergraduate and went backpacking around Asia before he went into grad school. Somehow or another, my little brother John, from Vietnam, his real name is Phan Hin Ten Tung. That's probably not how you pronounce it, but we called him John. That was what he wanted to be called, and he was an orphan. His dad was still alive. His mother died in childbirth, and his dad remarried. And apparently, his new stepmother did not like him and used to beat him quite a bit. So he, at the ripe old age of like 6 or 7, something like that, he ran away from home. They lived in a little village called Phan Rang. It was in South Vietnam somewhere. He lit out for the big city of Nha Trang, which is kind of a tourist city, one of the bigger cities in South Vietnam. I don't know a ton about it, but I know it's supposed to be like a really really beautiful city, especially for as far as Vietnam goes. But basically, he was a street urchin. He made his living selling postcards and cigarettes and T-shirts and whatnot. Somehow, some way, this little Vietnamese kid ran into this Jewish, I guess, backpacker at the time, tourist. Ran in, tried to sell him some postcards or some cigarettes or something, and Chris was the fella's name, Chris Wackenheim, and really a nice guy. Like, just came from completely different backgrounds. Well, from me, uh, especially from my brother John, but just really a kind person. Just I really I think the world of that Wackenheim family. They're a completely different background from me and my family, but just incredibly good people. And however it happened, whether it be luck, fate, God's plan, whatever you want to consider it, um, John and Chris ended up meeting up, and Chris paid. Well, I hired John on as his tour guide, and John, of course, that was money in his pocket, so of course he's gonna show him around Vietnam. And Chris really took a liking to him because John's a good kid, and you know, little different background, growing up on the streets of a big city in South Vietnam, but him and Chris hit it off, and they toured all around Vietnam, and Chris went on his way, and I never forgot John. And the way the adoption laws were for Vietnam was, I think you had to be 21 years older than the kid you were trying to adopt. And I'm still not real for sure how old John is. I'm not sure he knows exactly either. There's I was listening to what's that, Yeonmi Park, the North Korean. Uh, I guess you'd call her a defector. Now she's basically just a college student here in the U.S. But he was talking like you could be born on December 31st, and and then you would be one on January 1st. So everybody's birthday's on January 1st, and I don't know if that's how it worked in Vietnam, but I know there was some shenanigans that went on with the paperwork. But long story short, Chris was unable to adopt John, but never forgot him. And then somehow, some way, that that very wealthy Jewish family out of Rye, New York, got in touch with an adoption agency who put them in touch with my mom, who was just a bleeding heart for kids of especially ragamuffin type kids like myself and John and my brother Dexter and the whole lot of us. My folks had probably hundreds of foster kids coming, you know, in and out, swinging through on their way to wherever. And I was one of the lucky ones that they ended up adopting, and so was John. And I guess if you talk to John back when, say about a year or so in to do the whole adoption process coming over from Vietnam, he'd probably tell you he wasn't quite so lucky. He thought of himself more of a slave because he was, from a very very early age, was used to doing whatever the fuck he wanted to, and I mean just whatever he wanted to, uh, and then coming to a little ranch in southeast Colorado, and basically getting worked like a slave because we didn't get paid much. Every now and then we'd get a little bit of a payment, but for the most part it was just ranch work because that's what you had to do. Um, but the Wachenheim family played a big part in John's life, still do, and they so not only did they get in touch with my mom and lay the groundworks for getting John over here to the U.S. They also they financed a big chunk of it, if I remember right. And I was young enough at the time. I don't exactly know. I believe I was in eighth grade, um, seventh or eighth grade when John come over, and so I guess I've been exposed to a lot of different cultures from fairly young age, and despite being the isolated rural area that I grew up in. But those uh those folks from New York, Wachenheim family, they invited us out, me and John, every year. I went I think 3 summers in a row. We'd go out for about 2 weeks, and as I said, they were very very wealthy family, and I know Ed was the patriarch of the family, Chris's dad. Ed and Sue Wachenheim were their names, and Ed was a an investment manager. I don't know the exact title, but uh, he handled a lot of Wall Street investments for clients. And I can remember we were driving back from Martha's Vineyard. Um, they had property on Martha's Vineyard. Had well, I think there was 3 houses if I remember right, and they weren't beachfront property, but they weren't very far from. I know the and if I it's been like I said 20 years since I've been out there, but if I recall right, there was there's if you think of like New York City has the 5 boroughs, and then Martha's Vineyards nowhere near the size of New York, obviously, of the city, but it's an island out there off the coast of Massachusetts, and it's kind of set up the same way where there was like Chilmark and Edgartown, and there was a couple different little towns there on the island itself, and I think we were closest to Chilmark, if I remember right. Uh, but there, each little town had its own beach. There was, some of the beaches were private, where you had to have property close by and have a pass and whatnot. And that the one that we always went to uh, was Lucy Vincent, and it was kind of a semi private beach. I remember Lucy Vincent very well because they also had a nude beach, and being when I went there, I was believe 13, 14, and 15. So right at the time when nude beach would have been just everything I wanted to see in life. Uh, Found out real quick that nude beach is not quite what it cracks up to be. Yeah, there's a bunch of naked people, but most of them you don't particularly want to see naked. Um, and you know, the Wachenheim family, they coming from New York, they were considerably more liberal than the folks that I knew growing up, and they didn't think much of it. And of course, you know how older folks are. They know what's going on, but they just kind of turned a blind eye. We'd go to the beach. I think we spend about a week on Martha's Vineyard. But anyway, going back to my story, we were driving back from Martha's Vineyard, and Ed was on the cell phone, and these were the old shitty cell phones. It was like Motorola, had the pull out antenna, and bottom half would flip down. And he was just on the phone, and I remember Sue kind of getting agitated with him, but he was like, you know, didn't pay much attention because he was. Well, it turns out his firm. Well, I don't know if it was a brokerage firm or a hedge fund or what it was, but you know, whatever his company, whatever you would call that, is that investment. I guess investment firm, what you'd call it. They owned a pretty large stake of. It wasn't Reynolds Wrap, but it was another aluminum company that made aluminum foil, and Reynolds was in the process of buying them out, and so during I think it was somewhere around a 3 hour drive from Cape Cod back to New York, Rye, where they lived, which was right on Long Island Sound. And if you ever read The Great Gatsby, they were on, if I remember right, they were on the old money side of Long Island Sound. So it'd been like East Egg and West Egg. I don't remember which one was which, but they were on. They had waterfront property on Long Island, so they were doing just fine. And he, over the course of that 3 hour drive, made a bunch of different sales. I mean, he was just he'd sell a little bit here, sell a little bit there, but I believe for his firm they made somewhere north of $100 million in that 3 hour time period. I mean, so it was fascinating listening to all that, and we were in this Volvo station wagon, which, you know, for being incredibly wealthy people, they were, you know, they were fairly modest. They didn't have any real fancy cars or anything. I always pictured, you know, they'd have some sort of like uh you know, Mercedes or BMW Roadster before we went out there, and then we got out there, and they just had like a little fleet of uh well, that was Volvos, I guess. Volvo, um, I guess wagons. You know, they were oh late '90s, early 2000 station wagons, basically. And yeah, we just the whole time we were listening to Ed make deals, and it was wild coming from, you know, farm and ranch country, uh, and just listening to the amount of money that changed hands on the phone there. But we outside of Martha's Vineyard, that was always kind of my favorite part. Was going to the beach. Had my first little girlfriend on Martha's Vineyard that last time I went out when I was, it had been the summer right before I started my sophomore year of high school, and met this gal named Kelly, and you know, had some had some fun, as much fun as a 15-year-old can have on, on Martha's Vineyard without a car, having having the adults drop you off everywhere and curfew and all that horse shit. But so we're driving back, and then we'd always spend 2 or 3 days in the city. I think we only spent the night in the city itself once while I was there, but we spent a pretty considerable amount of time just doing some sightseeing. We didn't get to go see. Well, we took the ferry around Statue of Liberty, but we didn't get to go tour it because they were closed for renovation. But spent some time on the subway. Smells like piss. Um, the city itself. If anybody you've never been to New York City, I would highly recommend going. I don't know about nowadays with all the COVID nonsense going on, but it's it's a once in a lifetime type experience. You'll never see anything like it anywhere else. Where just the sheer amount of people and number of languages that you hear in just a block or two is just astounding. I mean, it'll blow your mind. But my little brother being from Vietnam, we spent quite a little bit of time in Chinatown, and Chinatown's just I mean, if New York City itself is a whole different world from Southeast Colorado, Chinatown's another fucking planet. I mean, it's wild, but it was neat. I remember walking off the plane in LaGuardia with a cowboy hat on, thinking I was going to get some strange looks, but hell, everybody there is too damn busy and worried about their own life that they don't hardly pay any attention to you at all unless you're in their way, and then they just kind of push on by and tell you to get the hell out of the way. And they don't really even mean anything by it. It's everything's busy, busy, busy. Um, that you'll hear a lot how you get out into rural America and stuff just slows down, but that's 100% true. It slows down once you get outside that city. And so I remember we went to the top of the Empire State Building, which it's close to 1,000 feet tall, and the World Trade Center. And yet that it has always bugged me ever since then. I don't recall which tower we were in, but we were in one of the towers of the World Trade Center, and we went pretty close to the top. I can't recall if we made it all the way to the top or not. They would try to cram just as much sightseeing as they could into period for it, which was, I mean, it was awesome. I got to witness a whole lot of different stuff, that a lot of people never get to see, you know, just as a junior high school, and got to tour around Washington D.C. Got to go up to Hyde Park, New York, and tour the FDR estate. And then, like I said, just we spent quite a little bit of time in the city, just going to try different food and seeing the sights, and you know hailing a cab. That was putting your hand out, and then this cab just comes into a halt in front of you, and you hop in, and it air conditioner kind of works, and it that car also smells like piss, and but it just part of the experience. But we went up in one of the towers, and it was to the day a month before they came down. It was August 11th, and so that was the last time I was in New York City, or I guess I flew out of LaGuardia, so I went into the city a couple days later to fly out. But the two other times I'd made the trip out there, we'd seen the twin towers from across Manhattan, and I mean it was even with all the skyscrapers and stuff, it was pretty tough to miss those twin towers. Boy, they were man, they were tall. Just I've been on some, I've been on top of some really tall canyons, some real high mountains. I've been on top of some really big grain elevators. When I worked there at Cactus, we had a pretty tall leg that I had to go work on, and there's still nothing quite like being on top of one of them skyscrapers, and it's just it is a humbling experience just looking down and just watching what looks to be just like a bunch of ants crawling around down on the street level, and it's you think those things are indestructible, and then fast forward to a month later where I'm trying to convince Teed that he had just watched some crappy movie, and like I'd just been up there. There's no way somebody flew a damn plane into that building, and then get to school, and shortly after that's when the second plane hit, and I don't think much happened the rest of that day. I mean, it was just they would wheel in the TV cart to our different rooms, and just we just watched the news. I believe we watched Fox News. I can't remember what channel it was, but and then people started you started seeing the people jump out rather than burn alive, and it just it didn't seem real. Just felt unreal. And and like it took me a couple months to even process that, because I had just fucking been there. I mean, I was just there. And so, like for the first month or so, you think about that and it's like there's no way that actually happened. And then of course, we're headed off to war, and and I'm 15, so there's there was a lot of talk about, well, is the draft coming back? And I was like, well, uh I my biological dad was drafted right out of high school to go to Vietnam, so I was like, they bring the draft back, that means I'm probably in too. And then the whole time you're just like, well, but I was just there. Like I was just, and we did go to the top, because I remember I dropped a penny off, and then got screamed at for not really screamed at. I think it was Stu that kind of scolded me for dropping a penny off the building, which with good reason. I mean, imagine if that thing hit somebody in the head. Um, Probably a miracle it didn't. But you know how it is when you get way up high on those. The wind is pretty significant up there. So I imagine as soon as that, I dropped that penny, lost sight of it pretty quick. But I imagine the kind of carried it away, and I remember looking on the news that night to see if if anybody had died from brain damage or something underneath the twin towers, but never did see anything. So it must have not hit anybody. Thank God. Um, but then after you realize, well, that after I don't know how many months afterwards they were cleaning that wreckage up and just digging through trying to find at first survivors, and then just trying to find bodies, so the people that the families of the victims could have some sort of closure. And then I mean, it started setting. It was like, man, that there's a lot of people that are just not coming back. And then you get to thinking, you put the dates together, and you're just like, man, that would have happened 1 month earlier. That I would have been there. And who knows if I'd have been lucky enough to get out, or if I'd have been one of the fellas jumping off the side of the building. I mean, you just don't know. And I mean, that's just an eerie feeling. there's I've had several I guess near death encounters where a horse falls on you or you roll or something, or you driving across country several times like I have, you nod off and you hit the rumble strips and you're like, oh shit. You know, that was a close one, but it's usually some sort of precaution that you can take or a corrective measure to, and you well, that was a close one. Won't let that happen again, but to be just sightseeing, and it just makes you wonder how many people were in those towers, just like I was a month before, just seeing the sights and you know heading to the top of the building because it's the fucking World Trade Center, man. Like you're in New York City, you want to see all the sights, and that's the tallest building in the biggest city in the U.S. And how many of those 3,000 people that died that day were just simply tourists, and how many, far more of them were just going to work. And I still don't really understand you know what people do in that type of building anymore. It's even though I was there month before, I kind of feel like old Boots did when he was talking about on Pearl Harbor. He thought maybe Pearl Harbor was just another part of the ranch. Um, but man, the Twin Towers might as well, you know, they might as well have been as far away as Pearl Harbor. I mean, they were a long way away from Walsh, Colorado, but just trying to relate to those people that were jumping off the buildings and stuff. Like we're all Americans, but man, we didn't have a whole lot in common with them. That I don't know what it was they did in those buildings. I don't know, how they grew up. If they grew up there in the city, or just the people, just the thousands upon thousands of people on the street that just going to and fro. I always one of the things I found kind of curious about New York City was the bicycle couriers, and they were just I'm sure there were women, but the ones that I noticed, they were all just kind of young guys in their you know early early to mid 20s. It seemed like had a had like a little satchel, like Indiana Jones type satchel, and a bicycle, and they would deliver letters or packages from one office building to another. And it always just kind of reminded me of Albert, our UPS driver that did the route where I grew up. And they were, I mean, they basically did the same job he did. They just didn't drive a truck. They rode a bicycle and delivered packages that way. And just like how many of those people like that, or just in New York City, there's a lot of people, especially if they were born and raised there in the city and never moved out, like don't know how to drive, because you don't drive anywhere in New York. Walk, you take the subway, or you hail a cab. But there's this old story I've heard. I don't know how true it is. I'm sure there's probably some truth to it, but it seems a little too far fetched to be 100% true, about some old gal that you know bought a car and ended up selling it like 3 weeks later, and she just basically paid the interest on the note, or something along the lines, but ended up being cheaper than paying for a parking spot. And then I do know for a fact there was Ed was telling me about, I don't know if it was a friend of his or somebody he knew, um, that would get an oil change every day, Monday through Friday, because he could, drop it off at Jiffy Lube, go into to the office, and they would change the oil there for him at Jiffy Lube, and would sit in their parking lot for the rest of the day, and he'd get off work, go pick it up, and it would cost him, $50 or whatever it was to change the oil, but it was still cheaper than paying like the, couple $100 a day to find a parking spot. And so like that is an example though. It just like people just don't drive there because for as many people and whatnot, it's not a huge landmass, and there's a lot of public transportation, buses, subway, train. Most people would take the train into the city, and train in and out, and it just it's a completely different way of life than how I grew up. It was 16 miles from my house to to city limits, and it was 12 miles of shitty dirt road, and then I guess 18 miles. What it was, 12 miles of shitty dirt road and 6 miles of probably even shittier gravel road or paved road, headed into town. And like you wouldn't. I mean, it didn't make sense not knowing how to drive. My little sister, I think she was 18 when she finally got her driver's license, but it was just like, man, when are you gonna learn how to drive? And then there's people there in New York City that still, grown ass men, they don't know how to drive because they just never had to. And you just wonder, like, how many of those people were hit with debris and stuff when planes hit, or when the towers started collapsing. Any of that stuff. I remember Ed had emailed my mom some pictures of Ground Zero, and I mean it just like a big gaping hole in the ground. Just we all remember, if you were old enough, I guess, to remember George W. making his famous speech there, standing on top of the rubble, and just twisted I beam and just just rubble. I guess is the best way to put it. Just absolute wreckage. And man, it still doesn't quite seem real today, and that was 20 years ago. Just it it really kind of put into perspective, so being an American. I was just about far away from, distance wise. We were pretty good jaunt away from any of those airplane attacks, whether one that went down in the field in Pennsylvania or one that hit the Pentagon or the Twin Towers. We were long ways geographically, neither of those, but as far as culturally and way of life, I mean, we were light years apart. Um, but I remember everybody being just pissed, and everybody was. I've never seen so many dang American flags, you know, whether it be on people's vehicles or lining the streets. All the flags were at half mast for a long damn time. And I remember remember watching I'd been to Yankee Stadium and watched them play, but I remember watching that game, that first Yankee game, uh, after the towers hit. It was it felt like, well, yeah, we were down for a minute, but you ain't keeping us down. And boy, it's sure a different world today. It's I don't even know what to make of it all, but it's just a different world. Uh, but I don't know. I'm not sure where I'm going with any of it. There's a lot of there's a lot of, like I said, it was a weird weekend, as far as kind of stuff that went down, and there's a lot of stuff to be pissed off about, but I just doesn't seem like doesn't seem like the time to be harping on any of that. You know, our president and former presidents have done plenty of that. To I think I'm good on the. So there'll be another time to be pissed off and rant and rave about some going on, but there's been a lot of talk over the years about that 9/12 and the 12th, but that the 9/12 moment and feeling of how just everybody was American. A lot of talk about how, we wish we could get back to that moment, and I think there's some truth to that. There's there's of course there was a lot of bad stuff that came out of that 9/12 moment, but that feeling of unity and everybody everybody had everyone's back. It's the closest I can ever recall a place, such a big city like New York, um, relating to rural America. I always go back to like the '07 blizzard that we had there on the high plains, where it was, we got 3 foot of snow and 60, 70 mile an hour winds, in a very short amount of time, and power poles were laid over. But luckily, we didn't catch any of the ice where I was, but we had a lot of snow. Everybody was snowed in, and you just had all the neighbors that had any sort of equipment were out trying to clear path, clear roads, get people to their cattle, check in on the older folks, make sure they're doing good, and that's in the days and months just directly after September 11th, 2001. That's about as close to being in harmony with like that feeling of like being a good neighbor. It seemed like for a place like New York City, where just you always hear the stories of the firemen and the police officers, and just and not so much, but even just or you don't hear about it so much, but just regular average citizens just pitching in, whether it be handing a bottle of water, or helping move the debris, or helping carry people out of the out of the wreckage, or just whatever, just helping out where they could, and just people from all over America donating food and supplies and clothing, and it was just for such an awful time. It was pretty goddamn magical to see, and I can always look back on that particular time period, but in particular September 12th, and it gives you there's still that little bit of hope for humanity, because like I've seen it happen. We've all seen it, where the country just comes together, because we needed each other. Even us people out in the sticks that, like I said, just about as far away from that situation as we could. I know plenty of volunteer firefighters and whatnot that they volunteered their time, and they went to New York and helped clean up the wreckage, rubble, and it's it was a definite feeling of unity. It was one of those just incredibly proud moments for me as an American to just see that, and I guess for that particular reason, I'll always have a little bit of a soft spot for New York City in particular. Just I didn't spend a lot of time there, It's not like I knew the streets and where to go when I was there, but I'd spent some time there, and then in particular being there at the top of the World Trade Center. It's almost a little bit. I had a little more of a personal moment than a lot of folks did. Uh, Seeing those towers come down. It's just, I don't know. I don't want to be the cliche say we got to get back to that type of moment, but I think back on it, and it still hold out some, you know I hold out quite a little bit of hope for humanity. I think I don't think all is lost yet, and there's plenty to be pissed off about, but I think there's even more thankful for that we live here in this great country. Just people forget how damn big U.S. is, how how truly diverse it is. Talking just the color of your skin, but just from giant skyscrapers to barren desert to you know not a tropical rainforest, but basically a rainforest up in the northwest to the swamp in Florida. Is it's an incredibly diverse country, and people from all walks of life that all share that one label as an American. And I think too often we forget that, and I don't know. It's I said I don't know where I'm going with any of this, but just I was having a hard time figuring out what I was gonna put out for you today, and so just jawing a little bit and remembering on 20 years ago, man. 20 years. Lots happened. Um, but I don't know. I think just about every time I think this damn country's just completely gone off the rails, and maybe there's no salvage for it there. I always try to remember that particular moment, because people were at each other's throats pretty damn hard back then too. I mean, we had another one of those contentious elections, another one that was decided by the electoral college, and George W. wins the electoral college, lost the popular vote, and things were pretty spicy domestically back then too, but it changed real quick, and yeah, it was pretty incredible to see how quickly people put that aside, and just helped out where they could. And I said, I don't know. It gives me a little hope for humanity yet. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know, but I sure like to think that there's we haven't hit that rock bottom at to reach that unity level, and then maybe that's I don't wish for that rock bottom moment, but I know what we're capable of, and like I said, it still gives me a little hope for humanity. So anyway, thanks for putting up with this uh, whatever you want to call it, rambler of a podcast. But um, make sure you reach out to your loved ones, and you know you never know when you won't be able to again. So it's too many people found out the hard way that day that you might not know. I do remember I I wasn't ever very concerned about the Wachenheim family being in the middle of ground zero or whatnot, but I do remember thinking it was really good I remember feeling very, very happy that they were safe. Hey, you know, even though they weren't in the city, I don't know. Maybe Ed was in the city that day, but they lived outside the city, but they were a hell of a lot closer to that one than I was when it all went down. And I just remember thinking it was sure good to hear that they were safe, and that's a weird feeling, just not knowing. Reach out to your loved ones and whatnot. You never know. You never know if you don't have a chance to do it again. So, anyways, thanks for putting up with me and uh, tuning in and all that. Make sure you I've got it posted on all my social media accounts, and Tracy Morrison has posted it as well. But just finished up a pair of Spurs that really look nice. We're gonna raffle those away. Got 50 spots open. I think there's a couple spots taken already. But 50 spots total. $50 will get you a spot, and we'll raffle them off somewhere around the first part of October. And a portion of the proceeds will go to the Farmer Veteran Coalition. You heard Mark Bowen talking about it here a couple weeks ago, but the good foundation is a good charity that we're gonna donate some towards them from these Spurs. So happy to do that, and big shout out to Tracy for doing all the heavy lifting there. He's the hell of a maker. Did a really nice. So anyway, check him out. You like to get entered up? Shoot me a message or whatever, and we'll get you hooked up. So, anyways, thanks guys for tuning in, and move your ass, burning day.